Hi, my name's Casey Callender, and I am a dive master and dive instructor on Kawaii, Hawaii. So I spend about 6 out of 7 days a week in the water, doing on average about 4 dives a day. So this gives me plenty of time to actually see what's occurring within the ecosystems, to actually see relative abundance of species that are out there. And that is why I became interested in a keystone species found here on Kawaii. However, before I specifically get into the keystone species of Kawaii, let's quickly go over what a keystone species is. A keystone species is a species that has a large effect on its environment relative to its abundance, almost disproportionately so. The species has a critical role in maintaining the structure of an ecological community, affects many other organisms within the ecosystems, helping to determine the types or numbers of various other species within the community. As you can see within this picture, this is one of the most classic examples of a keystone species. So on the left-hand column, you can see an abundance of sea otters. And with a high abundance of sea otters, they feed upon the sea urchins, keeping that sea urchin biomass very low. And the sea urchins happen to feed on kelp. And so when the sea urchin population is being controlled, then the kelp forest, there is a high density of it. However, when there's a low abundance of sea otters, as you see in the right-hand column, either due to being eaten by orcas or being poached by humans, there's not as many of them to eat the sea urchin, so the sea urchin is an overabundance. And because there's an overabundance of sea urchins, the density of kelp actually goes down because they're eating so much of it. However, this is very detrimental because the kelp forest is what makes up the environment that the ecosystem lives in. And so if the foundation of the environment that the ecosystem is in changes or is messed with or becomes low, then that really has a huge effect on the entire community, on the entire ecosystem, because that is their home. So this leads me to the keystone species of Kawaii. The keystone species of Kawaii is Coronia tritonus, commonly known as the Triton's trumpet. It is the largest gastropod and can get up to 20 inches in length. Adult tritons are active predators that feed upon other mollusks and sea stars. Triton's trumpets can actually be observed giving chase to their prey because they can detect their scent. Sea stars such as the crown of thorns, can detect when the Triton's trumpet actually give chase to them and will start to run away. However, the Triton's trumpet is actually faster and still will prey upon them. So, however, here in Kawaii, you do not see very many of them. In the last 8 months or so, I've maybe seen 3, possibly 4 Triton's trumpet. One in particular I've seen repetitively 3 or 4 times at a specific dive site called Sheridan Caverns. It is, so as you can see, it is not very common. They're not in abundance here. And it is because of humans. So now you might be wondering, what do humans have to do with this? As I mentioned earlier, they're the largest gastropod, and even though their meat can be consumed, it is not consumed regularly. However, they do create these large, beautiful shells, and these beautiful shells are actually what they are harvested for. As you can see in this picture, behind all the trinkets on the back shelf, you can actually see a few Triton's trumpets lying down. So a lot of tourists will come to areas such as Kauai or places like Australia and want to take something home, something to put on a mantle, something as a gift, and it just so happens that the Triton's trumpet is one of the most sought after. And this is one of the main purposes for their harvest. Also, specifically here in Hawaii, they're used for ceremonial purposes. The Hawaiians will blow the Triton's trumpet in order to pay homage to gods depending on the kind of ceremony it was. I was actually skeptical in order to know if that was still common enough in today's world to know if it actually created a demand for them to be harvested. And this is actually my own personal officiant from my Hawaiian wedding a little over a month ago, and you can see to my surprise when he pulled out a Triton's trumpet and actually blew it during the ceremony. So I actually witnessed firsthand that it is used in today's world. So why are the Triton's trumpet so important? They're actually the main predator of the crown of thorns. The scientific name is Acanthastor plantae. The crown of thorns sea star has venomous thorn-like spines that cover its upper surface. As you can see in this picture, there are green spikes all over that body, and those are actually its venomous spines. It is one of the largest sea stars in the world, and it ranges from 9 to 14 inches in length. So, what is so wrong with these sea stars? Just like the sea urchins, they prey upon the environment that the ecosystem is living in, that it's creating a life around. Specifically, the crown of thorns sea stars preys upon coral. It'll bend and twist in order to fit around the contours of the corals in which it feeds. I will now play you a video where I actually show a crown of thorns sea star that I took a video in about 10 feet of water. It was a shore site, so it was snorkelable. You were able to see it through snorkeling or through diving. However, I have seen them off of boat diving sites in around 90 feet of water also. So here's the video. Just mind my face in the very beginning. So, as you can see in that video, the crown of thorns was actually contouring its body to that coral head. When I first dove down, it was not upon that coral head, and it moved to the coral and started fitting its body around it in order to start eating it. So now, what is the connection between the Triton's trumpet and the crown of thorns? As I said, the Triton's trumpet is the main predator of the crown of thorns. Specifically here in Kawaii, it is the only predator of the crown of thorns. And so without the Triton's trumpet to eat the crown of thorns, there can be a large abundance. I actually at one point interviewed some divers and fishermen, and it gave insight into why humans may not be a threat to crown of thorns also. They're very hard to kill, and specifically in this circumstance, the diver's relative was cutting apart a crown of thorns sea star, got pricked by one of its venomous spines, got an infection, and actually ended up dying. So they are actually very dangerous. And so, besides the Triton's trumpet, there really isn't anything out there that is lowering the abundance of crown of thorns sea stars. So as I mentioned earlier, this is a keystone situation. So just to go over it really quickly, the humans hunt the Triton's trumpet reduces, the crown of thorns flourishes, and more coral is eaten. And this is very detrimental because since the crown of thorns eats the coral, that is affecting the actual habitat that the ecosystem is living in, just like the sea urchins with the sea kelp. Specifically, out in the field, what you can see on the south shores of Kauai, specifically in a Poipu area, there's about a 3-mile range that holds about 10 to 15 beaches where you can snorkel, dive, or free dive at, and then about 25 different boat diving sites no more than a half-mile offshore where you can easily go scuba diving or free diving in order to actually see the overabundance of crown of thorns sea stars and the lack of Triton's trumpet. While I was out there, I actually used a tape measure, and the smallest crown of thorns that I found was 5 inches long, while the largest was 14 inches long. There was an average length of 10 inches long, and as I said, I very seldom see the Triton's trumpet. So it is something that can actually be viewed. And while I was out there, I actually interviewed an assortment of divers and fishermen that also spend most of their days in the water, some diving more than me, some diving less than me, and I asked them how often they see Triton's trumpet and how often they see crown of thorns sea stars, and this is their interviews below. Just to let you know, in the first video, he cannot be heard very well. Just as a heads up, he says he sees about 15 to 20 crown of thorns sea stars in a week and 2 to 4 Triton's trumpets in a month if he is lucky. So here they are.
I'd say I'd see 15 to 20 crown of thorns in a week, and Triton's trumpets 2 to 4 max in a month. I don't know.
So I see the crown of thorns typically every time I dive, so pretty often. And I see the Triton's trumpets probably, if anything, once a month. It's very unlikely that I see them, so I would say once a month.
Hi, my name's Jessie, and I see from 8 to 10 crown of thorns a week, and if I'm lucky, 1 Triton trumpet a week.
I'd say we see crown of thorns sea stars almost on a daily basis, sometimes as few as 1, sometimes as many as a half a dozen. And the Triton's trumpets shells, I would say, if we're lucky, we see once a week.
So as you can tell, even if there is an assortment of how often people see them, some people diving more from shore, some people diving more from boat, it is very easy to tell that there is much more crowns of thorns than there are Triton's trumpet, and that the crown of thorns definitely are in overabundance. And this leads me to the concept of a keystone species, how a keystone species is often in a role of an arch, where the keystone species is under the least amount of pressure of any of the stones in the arch. However, when the keystone species is not within the arch will collapse, and that's what this picture depicts. That even though the Triton's trumpet may not seem overly important, they still provide a vital role, and without them, it will give rise to a difference within the ecosystem. So, just as a quick reminder, the Triton's trumpet is a keystone species because they help control the population of the crown of thorns. Without a controlled population of the crown of thorns, they will overeat the coral, affecting the environment that the ecosystem is based around, and ultimately affecting the proportions of other species within that ecosystem. So it is something that can actually be viewed in the field. It is something that can be viewed by shore, by boat, in 10 feet of water, in 90 feet of water. They can be measured, it can be seen. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I hope you learned a little bit about the keystone species of Kawaii. Here is my works cited page where you can learn a bit more about these species, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Thank you.